Time sure does fly when you're having fun, am I right, guys? I'll admit we've had some great moments in this decade across all forms of motorsports, sprinkled in among all the mindless and disastrous choices that the higher-ups have forced upon us. Recent years haven't been all that wonderful for us, but here are top 10 of the most iconic NASCAR moments of the 2010s. The only rules of this list are that the moment has to have taken place sometime between January 1st, 2010 and December 31st of 2019. Since I'm apparently a top 10 list YouTuber now, this is the part of the video where I have to remind my viewers to sexually violate the like button as well as subscribing. Don't forget to click that bell! God, I hate myself right now.
Number 10.
The 2013 Auto Club 400 finish. Look, we're pretty hard pressed these days to get down to the wire battles for the win where you can reasonably see the second place driver actually make the pass to win, especially in the Cup Series. That's why the 2013 Auto Club 400 finish is so memorable. Fontana hasn't seen a finish this strong since this race between the 11 and 22. It was a bit of a boiling over moment too as well, because the two had been involved in incidents in the preceding weeks. Remind you of anything? This slugging match saw the two leaders battle side by side till the final quarter of the race, where Kyle Busch casually drove 3 wide past the both of them as they wrecked, going on to win the race. It was easily one of the best finishes of the year, as 2013 isn't exactly remembered as a world beater season. The wreck would result in Denny Hamlin injuring his back and having to be removed from the car for a few races. Statistically, 2013 is Hamlin's worst career season, and it's not hard to understand why after watching the finish to this race.
I'm gonna bust his ass.
Number 9.
The 2013 Xfinity Series opener at Daytona. Sticking to the same year as number 10, we'll dive down to our only non-Cup moment of the list. The 2013 Nationwide Series Drive for COPD 300 saw a rash of violent cautions, one of which crippled the career of Michael Annett, who was coming off his best career season and kept him out of the car for several months. But if you can believe it, that's not the reason this race is on the list. On the final lap of the race, coming to the finish, Kyle Larson, driving a delicious Steve Turner 32 car, was sent into the catch fence, tearing the car to shreds and injuring some spectators. This race is the spiritual end to the tandem drafting era of NASCAR, because even though they'd already redesigned the Cup Series cars to make it nearly impossible to tandem draft at plate tracks, they decided to add a rule that's virtually never enforced into the Xfinity and Truck Series, which disallows drivers from locking bumpers at plate tracks. It's pretty easy to identify the fact that locking bumpers didn't cause this incident to begin with, but whatever, I suppose. And so ended the best era of plate racing in NASCAR history. Deep sigh time.
Number 8.
The 2016 Daytona 500 finish. When NASCAR fans think of Daytona, they usually think of splendor, prestige, history, triumph, greatness. I personally can only think of disappointment, blue balls, and crippling depression. The 2016 edition of this race is no exception. After a generally uneventful and forgettable 198 miles before the final lap, Matt Kenseth, who had stuck together with his teammates and dominated up until then, was abandoned by Denny Hamlin on the backstretch, and coming to the line, the 11 and 78 were side by side. Because this is Daytona, and I'm never allowed to have anything go my way at Daytona, Hamlin was the one who edged and took the trophy home. This race stands as the closest finish at Daytona in Cup, and I believe the closest finish of this decade, apart from the ridiculous 2011 Talladega finish that saw 8 cars 4 wide battling for the win. The only reason I put the 2016 race in at number 8 and not the 2011 race is because of the prestige of the Daytona 500. The Talladega race is inarguably more iconic, but hey, what are you gonna do?
Number 7.
The death of Kevin Moore Jr. That's right, the number 7 entry on this list didn't even take place during a NASCAR race, but the implications of the death of Kevin Moore Jr. shook the very foundation of motorsports in America. I mean, even the Young Turks covered this incident. The Young Turks! Tony Stewart's Cup career was already torpedoing in a downward spiral after a broken leg the year before shortened his season. Stewart has never been shy about his love of dirt tracks and sprint cars, and that love turned into tragedy one August night in New York when he struck Ward after the two had tangled during a sprint car feature. The aftermath of this incident led NASCAR themselves overhauling their post-crash processes. The drivers were no longer allowed to get out of their cars until safety personnel were on site, and the days of drivers throwing their helmets at other drivers after wrecks virtually came to an end. I've made so many videos on the subject already, so I'm not going to go through the social implications of this moment. But this day changed the face of American racing, especially NASCAR, in not only the eyes of the fans, but the eyes of the general public.
Number 6.
Spingate. We had no idea at the time, but the 2013 Federated Auto Parts 400 at Richmond might have been one of the most significant races in NASCAR history. If you've lived under a rock the past 6 years, on lap 393 of 400, Ryan Newman was leading and on his way to his second win of 2013. Now in 2013, there was this chase concept called the wild card, which is basically the infant stage of the current win and you're in chase format that we have to deal with today. Essentially, if you were in 11th place in points or lower, winning a race would give you a guaranteed spot in either the 11th or 12th spot in the chase. Of course, this meant that if more than 2 people 11th or lower in points found victory lane, or one driver found victory lane twice, only 2 of them would be allowed to make the chase. That meant that Martin Truex Jr., who only had 1 win, would be knocked out by Newman if he got a second win. This is where Clint Bowyer comes in. We have no definitive smoking gun evidence that Bowyer intentionally wrecked to cause this caution, or that Brian Vickers was told to pit under the caution to give Truex more spots, or that under-the-table deals were made between Front Row Motorsports drivers David Reagan and David Gilliland to race Logano as hard as possible on this final restart, but we can pretty much assume that this was Robert Kaufman and Michael Waltrip's Racing's intentions in the final laps of the race. Newman, of course, lost the race on the restart, knocking him out of the chase in favor of Truex. NASCAR Twitter was on fire after this race, and the ensuing penalties and sponsor dips that essentially ended Martin Truex Jr.'s career before it was saved by divine intervention at Furniture Row Racing. And let's not forget that Aaron's leaving Waltrip in favor of Chase Elliott might have been the only reason Elliott got a chance at a full season of racing in K&N. And let's also not forget about Michael Waltrip's Racing's closure in 2015, which was arguably set into motion this very night in 2013. In fact, the very first NASCAR anger video that I ever made was in response to the penalties that MWR received from this incident. Unfortunately, I was hyper aware of how terrible this video was, so I deleted it out of embarrassment, so sadly we will never be able to see this footage again. In any case, the absolute hog-wild turn that Truex's career took in the 5 years after the 2013 Federated Auto Parts 400 would have never been possible without a single decision on lap 393 that set into motion a ridiculous butterfly effect of circumstances that would completely change the face of NASCAR history.
Number 5.
The 2013 Coke Zero 400 finish. This race followed up one of the most boring plate race finishes of the millennium at Talladega, and it sure did try to rectify it. This race was plagued by rain and didn't see the green flag until it was technically Monday in Florida. Tired drivers and up nerves made this race a caution fest. On the final lap, Redneck Jesus himself, Dale Earnhardt Jr., was back on his bullshit, and the race was looking like it was ready to mirror the finish to the Talladega race earlier in the season. This would all change in the Tri-Oval, when Earnhardt easily won uncontested, but behind him, Austin Dillon was sent into the catch fence in possibly the most violent wreck of the decade. Dillon's car detonated when it hit the fence, tearing the entire nose off the car, and to this day, I still don't know where the actual engine ended up. The car came to rest upside down, virtually unrecognizable in the infield grass. Matters weren't helped when a few seconds later, Brad Keselowski swooped into the debris field and pile drove into the carcass one last time for good measure. It seemed like there was no way Austin could have possibly survived that wreck, but lo and behold, he rose out of what used to be his 3-car, basically unhurt. It was the greatest testament to NASCAR's safety development since Michael McDowell's Texas flip, and is still seen to this day as one of the least likely stories of survival. It also unfortunately meant that he was still around to dump the leader at the same track and win the most prestigious race in American motorsports, so...
Number 4.
The 2012 Daytona 500. Sure are a lot of Daytona moments in this list, aren't there? The 2012 Daytona 500 was another race cursed by rain and was unable to take place until Monday night in prime time. The race had several memorable moments of hard racing and excitement, but this race isn't on the list because of the multi-car incidents, primetime setting, or action-packed finish. No, my friends, this race is on the list for just one reason. On lap 157, a single car incident brought out the caution flag, and some drivers pit and some drivers didn't. Everything seemed pretty routine, so Fox cut to commercials. When they cut back, the target number 42 of Juan Pablo Montoya was sitting in the infield in turn 3 destroyed, and a jet dryer was on fire. I remember watching this race live, and when they cut back to the destroyed 42, I remember myself saying, verbatim, "Now what the hell happened?" It turns out that under caution, Montoya was working his way around the track to rejoin the pack, but had a mechanical failure at the exact perfect moment to slide straight up the track and into the jet engine of the track cleanup truck. This ignited a huge fire and resulted in a 40-minute long red flag to clean up the madness. Juan Montoya is a Indianapolis 500 winner, 7-time Formula 1 Grand Prix champion, a multi-time Rolex 24 winner. He's one of the most decorated racers of a generation, and the Juan thing that he'll be remembered for in NASCAR will be one of the most unbelievable moments in Daytona history. And not to mention that under this red flag, the leader of the race was none other than Dave Blaney. It doesn't get much more iconic than that.
Number 3.
The 2018 Bank of America Roval 500 finish. This race might go down as the single most important race of the century for multiple reasons. Reasons I may or may not go into in the future depending on how lazy I am. But I am ranking this at number 3 for the moment, as the sheer earth-shattering aftershocks of this race are still rattling in NASCAR to this day. And most of us still don't actually understand the implications of this finish. For years, NASCAR fans were clamoring, begging NASCAR to add another road course race to the Cup Series schedule, and in 2018, NASCAR finally gave them their wish. Kinda. They revamped the infield of the Charlotte Motor Speedway in hopes of hosting the first ever Cup Series Roval race. The anticipation of this race was palpable, and when the green flag finally waved for the Bank of America Roval 500, the fans were met with a interesting race. With 5 laps to go, the second to last restart of the day came as 6 of the front-running drivers completely gave up into the first quarter of the track, slamming into the wall and losing on their chance to win the inaugural Roval race. This set up a green-white checkered battle for the win between 7-time Cup Series champion Jimmie Johnson and defending Cup Series champion Martin Truex Jr. Johnson hadn't won for over 40 races and was trying to redeem himself after a pathetic season by winning for the first time in a year and locking himself into the next round of the chase. Truex was trying to establish himself as the favorite for the title and reassert his dominance as he was slowly inching his way towards becoming the winningmost driver in all of NASCAR the past 3 seasons. The two would battle all the way to the final corner, where the 7-time champion overdrove the corner, wrecked himself trying to avoid hitting Truex, still hit Truex anyway, and like Moses parting the sea, the young up-and-coming Ryan Blaney would drive straight through the carnage and take the checkered flag in the first ever Roval race. The wreck resulted in Jimmie Johnson missing the second round of the chase and Ryan Blaney jumping into it. That only begins to scratch the surface of the implications this race had on not only the 2018 season, but the very future of NASCAR. I haven't even mentioned how this race opened the door for future Roval races at other NASCAR tracks, or the symbolism of how this finish involved the past, present, and future of NASCAR, not only on track, but also in essence. There's simply way too much that happened in this one corner to discuss in this top 10 list. If you want me to go into further detail on the broad sweeping implications of the 2018 Roval finish, be sure to comment #CorbinTrue2020Champ in the comment section. But for now, we can revel in the sheer lunacy that was the finish to this cutoff race.
Number 2.
The wreck. 2015 was not a fun year. It provided us with some of the worst racing that NASCAR has ever seen. Passing was nearly impossible at times, and clean air established itself as the one and only force that would determine the outcome of races. That would all change in the 2015 Chase Kansas race. For the first time all season, the second place car was faster than the first place car. With 14 laps remaining in the event, Matt Kenseth was spun by everyone's favorite fluke, Joey Logano. The wreck dropped Kenseth into a must-win position at Talladega, and we all know how that race went. The frustration was building underneath the helmet of the driver of the 20 car, and it would boil over at the very next race, Martinsville. Kenseth did not make the third round of the chase despite his 3 previous wins in the season. Penske dominated the race as they had all races for the previous 2 months, and Kenseth did everything he could to chase the 2 down. But nothing worked, until a late race restart that lined Kenseth up on the inside of the 3rd row. Kenseth got a great jump and was nearly into second when Brad Keselowski got loose out of turn 2, sending Kenseth down the track and into Kurt Busch. This virtually ended Kenseth's race as he went behind the wall for repairs. But Matt wasn't done. With under 50 laps to go, he rejoined the track with one thought on his mind. Penske had ended his season, so he was going to end theirs. And so ensued my second favorite moment in NASCAR history.
Kenseth cleared by Logano, maybe no! Kenseth takes him out! Logano into the wall! Caution comes out and the crowd roars!
The wreck resulted in Kenseth being suspended for the next 2 weeks, giving Eric Jones a chance at the Cup Series while he was still a full-time truck driver. The wreck is one of the most hotly contested moments in NASCAR history, with hundreds of different opinions and very little agreement among onlookers. But one thing's for sure, it happened. And goddamn, it was glorious. And the number 1 most iconic NASCAR moment of the 2010s is the fight. Texas Motor Speedway isn't usually considered a must-see race, but it was during the 2014 chase. Brad Keselowski had just 2 weeks before made an 11th hour charge to win at Talladega and lock himself into the 3rd round of the chase. But a tough Martinsville race set him back for the remaining 2 races in the round. He was poised to make another Herculean move to drive his way into the championship race on a late race restart. As teammates Jeff Gordon and Jimmy Johnson lined up on the front row, Brad saw an opening. But that opening closed too quickly, and the 2 made contact with the 24, cutting a tire on the 24 and putting the race back under yellow. Johnson defeated Keselowski on the ensuing restart, and the move looked like it had been all for nothing. But on the pit lane after the race was finished, things were about to change forever. Keselowski had already been involved in a few post-race scuffles a few weeks prior at Charlotte, but nothing was going to prepare Brad for what was about to happen. Jeff Gordon pulled alongside the 2 car and the 2 exchanged words. There were definitely hurt feelings, but things appeared to be simmering down. Until Kevin Harvick came out of nowhere and initiated the most iconic NASCAR moment of the 2010s. Gordon reached out and grabbed a hold of Brad's fire suit, and it was on from there. Crew members from several teams jumped into the dog pile, and while the fight lasted under a minute, it completely changed the atmosphere of the 2014 NASCAR Cup Series chase. It was no longer about 16 drivers fighting for 4 spots at Miami. It was Jeff Gordon versus Brad Keselowski, 2 former champions trying to solidify their spots in NASCAR history. Fines, suspensions, all that good stuff came out of this fight. Probably the only disappointing thing that came out of the fight is that neither driver actually went on to battle for the championship at Miami. Just imagine if it came down to those 2 on the final restart. In any case, no matter how history will look back on the 2014 chase, or how this newfangled chase format is as a whole, in every sense of the phrase, the fight is the most iconic NASCAR moment of the 2010s. So that's the video. I guess this is the part where I'm supposed to shill myself. If you haven't done it already, do the subscribe button thing that everyone talks about. I got a Twitter account that's basically my second channel at this point, so if you enjoy these videos, you will enjoy that even more. I'm also on Instagram, even though I really only post storm chasing stuff on there. I guess that's the video. So anyway, thanks for watching, and I will see you in whatever piece of sellout material I post next. Bye!